Warning. The following video is not intended for an audience under the age of 13. Do not watch the video without a guardian or parent present. That is all.
Rumble is red, Frenzy is blue, and I'm not making any cliche jokes in this toy review. Now then, before I get any further with the review, I am obligated to make this joke. Overall, the last decade was pretty good. However, a few of its years kinda stank, we'll say. Specifically 2016. I mean, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of good in every year, but unfortunately, for the past few years, it's felt as though there's been less and less good in the world. Now, of course, now that the 2010s have come and passed, let's try and make 2020 as great as we possibly can. And for me, it will all start out with the review of this figure, Siege Ape Face. So, as we're all mostly aware by now, Siege has come and gone. And today we're going to be discussing one of the last figures, well, last Voyagers that were released during it. And last time, I believe I said,
I am of the belief that it would behoove of me to postpone verbalizing my thoughts on this figure until such a time where I can appropriately create a video review.
And I believe I owe you all a review of this diabolical GGDLE. But before we get to the... No, wait, that's way too cliche. Just a second, please. Just a second. Ah, yes, here we go. Let's see here. Bonobo sales pitch. Throat wobbler mangrove bargaining. Cotton top tamarind marketing. Madam Berth's mouse lemur boardroom meeting. Yeah, why not? But before we get to the literal Madam Berth's mouse lemur boardroom meeting, we should talk about what I feel is his weakest mode. The jet mode. My biggest problem with this mode is that there isn't enough color separation, specifically on the top. I would have loved for this middle panel here to be some darker color like gunmetal or black, but yeah, that's far from the biggest problem with this figure, and it would certainly help break up this yellowed white plastic, which in of itself is kinda bad in that if you look close enough, you'll start to see the details. The sculpting specifically on these parts is very, very soft, and I don't like that. Another problem with this mold is the gun. Specifically the fact that it's extremely loose. Now then, in the instructions, you're supposed to peg it in and it will stay in place. However, it does not. And I have a feeling that it's mostly because this peg isn't thick enough. And unfortunately, there's a bit of a stability issue with, like, pegging this in. It's more tricky than it needs to be when you're transforming it. Heck, even the pegs on the wings are kind of loose and floppy. As are the ones on the shoulders. As are the ones on the shoulders, the sides of the vehicle, and of course, the wrists. I don't see how this couldn't have been fixed, honestly. Even the second peg that's underneath the nose cone doesn't work all that well. I mean, it does stay in place, but that's mostly because of the gorilla chin keeping it in place. Remove that, and it's just as floppy as the other peg holes that I've mentioned. But there is still a lot to like about this figure, like the molded detail, the hot pink wings and nose cone, and the very tiny Decepticon sigil on the nose cone, and as well as the paint matching here at the back of the wings, as well as the literal two cockpits. One for the ape face, and of course, one for Spasma here in the back. Speaking of the hindquarters cockpit, it's actually very difficult to get little Spasma here in and out, mostly because the pegs are super tight, A, and B, there's not enough space to maneuver. Now then, speaking of Spasma, he is the Titan Master that has the best paint job out of all of the generation's Titan Masters. I mean, just like, we've got a distinct visor, a mouth, and yeah, it's a pretty good job on this Spasma figure. And we also have paint on the arms, and on the back, and on the calves. All told, I actually like this vehicle a bit, but it's not his best mode, we'll say. Now, of course, as I say, it's time to proceed Baboon. Now, of course, we get to the second weakest mode. And of course, the aforementioned Madame Berth's mouse lemur boardroom meeting. God, that's really hard to say. I should have gone with a simpler thing. It's still got a few of the same problems as the jet mode, but at least it's a bit more posable, which makes up for some of the jet mode's weaknesses. In fact, here are a few photos I took of this figure. And if we look at the shoulders, we see that there are mountable pegs for Titan Masters. The gun still doesn't have an appropriate place to slot into, but now the shield experiences the exact same problem, except it actually wants to stay in. Of course, because this is a primate, I'm of course obligated to make this Invader Zim reference.
I got monkeys in me!
I hope you're happy, cause I sure ain't. Now then, of course, we have hit robot mode, and from an aesthetic standpoint, it's nearly perfect. I mean, the white plastic still kinda sucks, but overall it's not too bad. And for as much crap as I've given the gun, aesthetically it does look pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of molded detail here, and the gun is of course impeccably detailed. And this is literally the only peg that will actually hold it tightly aside from the feet. And much like his gun, the rest of this malevolent marmoset is also thoroughly detailed. And heck, while it doesn't pick up on camera, it still makes the battle damage that we've all been ridiculing for months look good. On the shoulders it's a bit spotty, but on the legs, it actually helps it, I'd say. Having said that, I do still have a few problems with this conniving chimpanzee. First of all, are the accessories. I've already talked crap about the gun, but the shield isn't much better, and there are a few good reasons. The first and biggest problem that I have with it on a personal level is the fact that it's molded blue plastic. I personally despise this. Mostly because A, translucent plastic can get brittle over time, B, there are molded magenta parts already on the figure, and C, it just doesn't make any logical sense. I covered this in the Repugnance review, but it makes no logical sense in any universe whatsoever for you to take the piece, mold it in a different color when you already have plastic that's molded pink, then paint it pink. It doesn't make any freaking sense! And I know, to most people, this doesn't matter. But what happens when, I don't know, you drop this thing onto like some concrete and then there's a massive gash in it? You could paint it yourself, but then there's also the trouble that the paint, while I did say it was a decent match, isn't a perfect match. This thing's more maroon, while this one's a bit more pink. My second criticism is a bit less valid in that I think it's not big enough to actually be a proper shield. But this is a nitpick at most. My third problem, which is also a nitpick, is that there's a massive hole in it. How are you supposed to defend yourself if there's someone who can literally shoot at you through it? And now my fourth complaint with this shield is that, well, it doesn't have a good way to peg in. I mean, you can go for the shoulder, but then that's okay, but that's not where you're supposed to use a shield. The second place you can put it is the elbows, and while it is better, and it is tight, it's an extremely shallow peg, and you can knock it out pretty easy. The third option you have is the peg on the forearm, and while yes, that does work a bit better, it's also incredibly shallow. And it, well, pops out too easily again. And then we get to the fourth peg in the hand. If you do that, it incredibly hinders its articulation. You can't bend it forward and, actually use it as a shield. You can use the bicep swivel, but then there's no bend forward to, actually use it. The closest you can get is, bending his elbow backwards, but that doesn't look right. Especially when the thumb is in the wrong side. My other biggest issue with this mode is, annoyingly, the ape face itself. The face itself is way too small, but I think I've been complaining a bit too much about this figure because, well, all told, I do love it. I love it so much, and honestly, it's a way better experience than Siege Springer was. And if I may, I'd love to dub this figure Now, if it were up to me, I would love to dub this figure the Triple Changer of the Year. But there were only 2 and Springer was a bit rubbish. But I do rather enjoy this monkey bastard. Overall, I think this figure is incredible. It's really good. And that's all I really wanted to say about it, really. Sure, it has its fair share of flaws, but honestly, it's still a good figure, and I totally get it if the flaws outweigh the positives for you. But for me, this is a fantastic figure. So with that out of the way, this is Firebite27, wishing a happy 2020 to you all. Please remember to like the video, share it with your friends, comment down below to tell me what you thought of this figure or the video as a whole, and of course, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you can see when I'm posting the next video. Toodles!